Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Senior Chief Petty Officer Keith JERMYN of the 7th Naval Construction Regiment. I will be your moderator for today's ceremony. At this time, I would ask all in attendance to please rise as the Department of Conservation Recreation Park Rangers parade the colors and remain standing as we offer an invocation by U.S. Navy veteran Reverend Mr. John MICHUGH. Uniform members in attendance, attend, ho! Parade, colors! Present, ho! Order! Halt! Detail, post your colors! Over here. Step over here. Wait. You're on, John.
Good morning. Today is not unlike the day that they had in Normandy 70 years ago. Eugene was a 20-year-old sailor, radioman, on a ship in Normandy. That was a day where over 2,000 American soldiers, sailors, were killed. They died in the landing there. But that was the landing which was going to carry us on to winning the battle. God bless them. We ask the Lord to come down and bless us today, to bless Jane and to bless us who are here to witness the dedication of a memorial to him. It's perfect that he is here because people from Hingham and Weymouth have been here going back until the Battle of Grape Island, which was the second battle of the Revolutionary War. It was right off the coast there, one of those islands. So it's fitting that we're here. We ask you all to keep Jane in your prayers. We're asking the Lord to come down and to bless all of us who are here and to bless you and your families. We ask this through the Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Deacon. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hingham Shipyard and welcome to the home of the U.S. Navy Amphibious Veterans of Massachusetts Memorial. We gather today to pay tribute to and recognize the tireless efforts of Mr. Eugene Creedon. Mr. Creedon was my dear friend and mentor to many here today, and he knew too well the significance of this day, for today is D-Day. And 74 years ago today, on June 6, 1944, the Western Allies of World War II launched the largest amphibious invasion in history when they assaulted Normandy, located on the northern coast of France. The invaders were able to establish a beachhead as part of Operation Overlord. After a successful D-Day, as they called it, or the first day of the invasion, Dwight D. Eisenhower addressed the troops saying, and I quote, "You are about to embark upon a great crusade, toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck." End quote. That day, more than 5,000 ships, 13,000 aircraft supported the D-Day invasion, and by the day's end, the Allies gained a foothold in continental Europe. The cost in lives on D-Day was in fact high. More than 9,000 Allied soldiers were killed or wounded, but their sacrifices allowed more than 100,000 soldiers to begin the slow, hard slog across Europe, which then led to the defeat and final surrender of the Axis powers. Gene, as he liked to be called, graduated from Boston English High School, class of 1943. He served proudly in the United States Navy during World War II and was the past president for the Massachusetts Association of Landing Ship Tanks, later known as the Amphibious Veterans of Massachusetts. Gene passed away at the age of 90 on February 2nd, 2016. During his tenure as president, and even after his title changed to emeritus, this World War II amphibious veteran was instrumental in constructing a permanent memorial on a parcel of land in the Hingham Shipyard, owned and operated by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. His tireless efforts included petitioning the Great and General Court in order to properly recognize not only the men who sailed aboard these vessels, but the 24,000 men and women, yard workers, who so expeditiously crafted them for war. In all, 95 of these LSTs were built in the Hingham Yard from 1944 to 1945. Understanding that the members of this organization would never live to see the fruits of their labor due to their increased age, he thoughtfully crafted an easement with his son Kevin for the town of Hingham and left specific instructions for a future generation by means of installing a time capsule beneath this stone. Please allow me to read a few excerpts from his letter to our representatives in the 3rd Plymouth District. Quote, "As you may imagine, our membership is elderly. Although the desire is there, the ability to maintain properly the monument and to keep the area surrounding the monument attractive is just not there anymore. The town of Hingham, in conjunction with the association, has proposed to take over the easement from us in order to ensure that the monument is properly taken care of in perpetuity. As you know, there is a time capsule under the monument which will be opened on June 6th, 2044, in honor of the 100th anniversary of the landing in Normandy, France, the largest and most crucial invasion in history. Sadly, none of us World War II or even Korean veteran war veterans will be present at this ceremony, although we hope and pray that our children and our grandchildren will be there to honor that day that changed history. Being part of a long-ago war, an adventure that we hope none of you will ever experience, left us with incredible memories. We are comforted to know that the town cares so much for the veterans of this country to accept the responsibility of sharing our legacy, and that thousands of our comrades who gave their lives for democracy." End quote. Again, let me draw your attention to the fact that Gene began this undertaking around 1993 at the age of 67, continually working to achieve this historic goal just a few short years ago at the age of 90. For a man to have given so much for his community, state, and nation, naming this park after him is the least that we can do. I now wish to bring forward or to recognize many of our state and local officials here with us today. First, let me introduce Commissioner of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Mr. Leo Roy. Leo.
Thank you, Keith. Good morning, and so glad to see so many of you here today. I bring you greetings of Governor Charlie Baker, Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito, and we're so delighted to be here to celebrate this day. The work of Gene Creedon to bring this about, as you just heard, was tireless. And it is important and fitting that it be at a DCR facility. As you probably know, the DCR oversees on your behalf as stewards some 500,000 acres of land across the Commonwealth. But the thing that we also do is we are the stewards of some of the most important historical sites as well. And we think about Fort Warren on George's Island or Fort Independence at Castle Island. And importantly, the War Memorial out at Mount Greylock, which just underwent a magnificent renovation. We at the DCR are stewards of these historic places that we protect on behalf of all of the citizens of Massachusetts and those facilities that really honor the service of so many who gave their lives for our country. The work of the DCR is carried out by a wonderful group of professionals, and I really want to acknowledge Susan Kane, who's here. She's our Islands District Manager. She spent many hours with Gene talking about this, planning this, and despite their differences, Susan retired as a lieutenant colonel from the Army, and the ribbing that they gave each other, Army-Navy, over the years, I think was very healthy banter. A very warm friendship established between Gene and Susan, and so we're very excited that we have a hand in being stewards of this place. Here at Hingham is the gateway to the Boston Harbor Islands, as you all know. And this 16.5 islands that we at the DCR manage on behalf of the citizens and our visitors are really an untold gem. And the history, and particularly the military history, as you referred to, Keith, of these islands is very significant. We hope to introduce a new generation of Massachusetts citizens and visitors to that history by increasing the visitation to the Boston Harbor Islands. We're very proud at the DCR to be participating in today's ceremony, and the honor is not to Mr. Creedon, but the honor is to us and the DCR to have this park named after him. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And at this time, I'd like to recognize the Massachusetts Department of Veteran Services General Counsel Stuart Ivermy to my left. And I'll now be calling up members of the delegation here in Hingham and Weymouth. State Senator Patrick O'Connor.
Thank you, Keith. It's an honor to be here today to recognize this park in honor of Gene Creedon. Being a small part of this, both on a staff end when I worked for former State Senator Robert Hedlund when Gene was shepherding this project to fruition, as well as taking part in the legislation we were able to pass in August of this year in order to formally name this for Gene has been an honor. When Keith talks about today being the anniversary of D-Day, you think about the things that you see on television, the stories that you've heard from the folks that have been there, and it's almost unbelievable to think of the sacrifice and courage and bravery that happened on that day. And I think that when you come to a place like this, the former Hingham Shipyard, and you can come to a park like this named for such a hero, you can reflect back and understand some of the sacrifice, not all of it, but some of the sacrifice that was made on behalf of all of the freedoms that we have and the ability to live in a country so rich and so great and so generous and so prosperous. And it hopefully will lead on, as Gene said in his remarks when he said that hopefully our children and grandchildren will be here when the time capsule's opened, that hopefully that spirit that our men and women who fought continues to pass on to future generations too. And so I think this is a completely fitting tribute here today. I'm glad that DCR is going to be the stewards of this property, as they are for so many wonderful properties across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And to the Creedon family, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to recognize your father, your grandfather, in his sacrifice to this community, because at a very young age, you're made well aware of the incredible military history that's here in Hingham, and I think that this is just one more stepping stone towards making it even greater. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Senator O'Connor. At this time, I'd like to invite State Representative James Murphy, State Representative Joe MESCHINO to come forward.
Thank you so much for including me here today. It's absolutely my delight as your public servant to assist in a small way in getting the legislation for this beautiful park. But I'd really like to do is thank Susan Kane for introducing me to Mr. Creedon. He had passed before I was elected, and so I did not actually have the pleasure of knowing him. But through meeting his family and through Susan and her relationship with him, it's clear that he was just a wonderful, dedicated, committed veteran, serviceman, veteran, and wonderful contributor to our community. And I think it was very wise of him to act in the present but look to the future, and to engage both the town of Hingham and DCR for their stewardship. I can think of no finer stewards than the town and the department to take care of this beautiful memorial. And I can't wait to see what the time capsule illuminates afterwards in 2044. And I just want to thank you so much for letting me be here and share this moment with you today.
Good morning. I'm Representative James Murphy. I have the pleasure of representing Weymouth and Hingham in the legislature. To think about a young man, 20 years old, going off to war, what he must have seen and the sacrifice that he made, we can't even begin to comprehend. Commissioner Roy mentioned earlier about being stewards of history. A large part of what we do in politics and in government, myself as a representative with Joan and Patrick, is preserving history for future generations, and today's another example of that. Eugene Creedon, imagine passing away at 90 years old and working for so many years to make this happen. It's a true testament to him and his family that today actually occurred, and I do plan on being here at the opening of the time capsule. I'll be 74 years old, but hopefully take a page out of Mr. Creedon's life and maybe eat well and take care of myself, and I'll be here for the opening of the time capsule. And also many of you, I look on the audience, will be here too. But imagine what he did for all of us. He served proudly in the U.S. Navy during World War II, the president of the Mass Association of Landing Ship Tanks, LST number 557. Through his efforts, we're here today. The memorial here acknowledges Mr. Creedon and all those who sailed aboard the vessels and the 24,000 men and women who constructed these ships for war. The community of Hingham has a long storied tradition of military service. It wasn't too long ago that we were here for the grand opening of the Herbert Foss Memorial Transportation Terminal over here. Quite an honor to be part of that also. We were approached many years ago by the town of Hingham, and I can't say enough about Keith JERMYN and what he does for the town of Hingham and for all veterans. And thank you to the veterans I see out there serving, both active and retired. But Keith, along with Mr. Creedon, kept this on the radar screen of the legislature. And the history is such that the bill was filed, House Bill number 3658, was filed by myself and Representative MESCHINO and my colleague Senator Patrick O'Connor in April of 2017, most recently. After a public hearing in May of that year, the committee released the bill favorably as House Bill 3708. The House of Representatives passed the legislation in May of 2017, and the Senate passed it in August of 2017. Governor Baker signed the bill into law, and it brings us here today to officially commemorate today's memorial. It's an honor to serve as representative for the past 18 years in the legislature. Days like today make me truly appreciate the sacrifice of those who came before me, what they did for all of us to allow me to stand here today in honor of them. So today is a great day for the town of Hingham. Today's a great day for the Creedon family. Congratulations to all of you. I know that people in life do not do things by themselves, so I know the family was very supportive of Gene in order to allow him to do what he did at a young age and then throughout the rest of his life. But because of his persistence, we're here today, and it's an honor for me to be a part of today's ceremony. So thank you all very much. Thank you.
Next, we will hear a proclamation read from our Board of Selectmen Chairman Paul Healy, along with Board of Selectmen Karen Johnson. So you guys are going to present to Frank. He's in the front row with the blue tie, without the glasses.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, representatives, senator, state officials. Before I read this proclamation, just a few words. I had the pleasure of working with Mr. Creedon while this park was in its infant stages. I had the privilege of being part of the permitting process of this great place that was once called the Hingham Shipyard. Within 3 years of its construction, 227 ships were built and launched. And those ships were instrumental in the Battle of the North Atlantic, in the D-Day landing. Saw the pictures of the LSTs damaged in the port cities of Calais and Le Havre. And I think Mr. Creedon put a human face on the ship numbers that appear in the panels on the walkway. And for that, I'm grateful, because I think that that gives a perspective for memory. And with that in mind, I'd offer the following proclamation in his behalf. Whereas the landing ship tank was the military designation for naval vessels created during World War II to support amphibious operations by carrying significant quantities of vehicles, cargo, and landing troops directly onto an unimproved shore. And whereas the first LST, commissioned on 27 October 1942, was a 328-foot ship with unique characteristics of bow doors and a ramp to transport troops, a reduced forward draft of fewer than 4 feet for successful breaching, 9 knot speed, a flat bottom, and equipped with a 20mm and 40mm guns on the upper and main decks. And whereas LSTs led the D-Day evacuation of 41,035 wounded men back across the English Channel from Normandy beaches. And whereas the LSTs and the sailors who manned them continued to provide amphibious landing and other services for 57 years following World War II, serving in the Incheon Landing and other operations during the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the 1974 refugee evacuations from Vietnam, Operation Sea Angel to provide humanitarian assistance to Bangladesh, Operation Desert Shield, Operation Desert Storm, and Operation Restore Hope in Somalia. Whereas Eugene F. Creedon, a radio technician second class, who proudly served in the United States Navy during World War II on LST 557, and was the past president for the Massachusetts Association of Landing Ship Tanks, later known as the Amphibious Veterans of Massachusetts. And whereas, during his tenure as president, and even after his title changed to emeritus, this veteran was instrumental in constructing a permanent memorial on a parcel of land in the Hingham Shipyard owned by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And whereas his tireless efforts included petitioning the Great and General Court in order to properly recognize not only the men who sailed aboard the 95 vessels built right here in the former Hingham Shipyard, but the 24,000 men and women, yard workers, who so expeditiously crafted them for war between 1944 and 1945. And whereas the town of Hingham, in conjunction with the Amphibious Veterans of Massachusetts, has proposed to take over the easement from the association in order to ensure that the monument is properly taken care of in perpetuity. And whereas a time capsule located beneath the granite memorial, which is registered with the International Time Capsule Society and Oglethorpe University, 4484 Peachtree Road, Northeast Atlanta, Georgia, shall be open for posterity during a public ceremony held on June 6, 2044, in order of the 100th anniversary of the landing. Now therefore, the park located on Shipyard Drive in the town of Hingham, that is shown on Parcel 8, on Landing Ship Tank Service Monument Relocation Exhibit, east of the department's building on 30 Shipyard Drive, be designated and known publicly as the Eugene F. Creedon Memorial Park, in recognition of Eugene F. Creedon's advocacy on behalf of World War II veterans. The town of Hingham is represented by its Board of Selectmen, Paul K. Healy, Mary M. Power, Karen A. Johnson.
So that proclamation, which was framed by one of our department heads, Mary Savage Dunham, will be presented to his oldest son, Frank, and then we have a copy signed and framed for each and every one of the Creedon children, grandchildren, and I believe a great-grandchild, so 8 in total. Thank you. I would also like to take note of some other officials. Town Clerk Eileen McCracken to my right. In the rear, if you could kindly turn, Town Administrator Tom Mayo. Police Chief Glenn Olson. Deputy Fire Chief Lou LaChance. Superintendent of the Department of Public Works Randy Sylvester. Randy is joined here today by his General Foreman, Jeff Handerhan, and I'd like to take a moment here to publicly recognize them for the amount of work and the beautiful way they have left this memorial and park since we took it over these last few years. The geranium display, the shrubs, the mulch, everything you do here, Jeff and Randy, please let your crew know it's greatly appreciated by the United States Navy and the town's veterans. And finally, I'd like to bring forward Kevin Creedon to share some final remarks for the entire Creedon family. Kevin.
Thank you. On behalf of the entire Creedon family, I wanted to express our heartfelt thanks to all of you who helped my father in getting his dream realized. I can safely say, and I think my siblings can also safely say, that never in his wildest imagination did he ever think that his dream would be to have a state park named in his memory. I can just see him now thinking, "What, are you serious? How can this possibly be?" In his usual self-deprecating way, that's just the way he was. But his dream did start shortly after he retired from the telephone company in 1985, moved to Kingston, and his dream was to establish the memorial here in the Hingham Shipyard to all the men and women who either built those glorious LSTs, he called them large, slow targets. That's how he referred to them. Or as he did, he served on one of those during World War II, actually in the Pacific Theater. He spoke little about his service in the Navy, and we didn't really try to pry too much out of him, frankly. But we know he saw the world through his service to this country. His ship was the number 557, which became his lucky number for the rest of his life. And of course, many of his fellow sailors and Marines and soldiers weren't so lucky, and they didn't return to this country after that war. And I consider myself and my family to be, very lucky and blessed that he did make it back, because obviously we would not be here today had he not. One quick story about my dad, and I don't want to bore you with stories about my dad, but one of my favorite stories about my dad was something he wrote in the newsletter, the LST Association newsletter, a number of years ago. And it was the story about his coming back to this country after the war, I think probably in 1946, maybe 47. Nothing particularly special about the journey, because that wasn't really Dad's way to really talk about that kind of stuff, although in later years he did tell us some stories that were totally shocking, I must say. But it was the last paragraph of that article that really struck me. And I'll paraphrase a little bit, but basically what he said was, when he returned to South Boston on the ship from overseas, he went to the Fargo building, picked up his last paycheck, and took the subway home. And that was just his way of understating everything. After all he had been through, he took the subway home after he cashed his last check. That's why we're so thankful, I think, for all of this. Extremely grateful to Governor Baker for signing the bill into law. Grateful to Senator Patrick O'Connor and Representatives James Murphy and Joan MESCHINO. Thank you very much. Also like to thank DCR Commissioner Roy for his support of this effort. Without his approval, this never would have happened. And a great big thanks to Susan, Islands Manager Susan Kane, for her tireless efforts in getting this thing accomplished. You were a great friend to Dad, and he greatly admired you. And also, I'd be remiss in not thanking the town of Hingham and the Board of Selectmen for agreeing to take on this responsibility of maintaining this easement in perpetuity. It was a great gesture of goodwill on their part. And finally, last but not least, Keith, thank you for all of your efforts, without which this never would have happened. You were a great friend to Dad as well, and we appreciate that. Great. He admired everything you did, and you still do. So, thank you, and God bless.
Thank you all here today for sharing your reflections during this beautiful occasion for the Creedon family. Ladies and gentlemen and honored guests, please draw your attention to the memorial sign directly behind me. And at this time, I would invite Commissioner Roy, his Island District Manager Susan Kane, and members of the Creedon family who are willing and able to assist with the unveiling. Now, as they are returning to their seats, I will ask you to draw your attention to the case standard directly behind me. And if I could get Susan Kane and daughter Kathleen to join me at the podium. As was mentioned, Susan Kane was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, Massachusetts Army National Guard, retired. Army Reserve, correct, I stand corrected. This U.S. flag she is holding was actually removed from this pole immediately upon notification of Gene's passing. The colonel, having incredible foresight and compassion for her dear friend's family, ordered these colors retired and removed from service February 2nd, 2016. What a beautiful gesture. At this point in our program, we will be honoring all those brave men and women who have been lost at sea. I would ask you that if you are not, please rise at this time as Town of Hingham Harbor Master Ken Corson accepts the bouquet and commits it to the deep. Harbor Master. Uniform members, a teen, hoot! Precinct, hoot! Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. For today's benediction, I'll be reading from a letter that I authored to the amphibious veterans of Massachusetts President on November 2nd, 2014. And I quote, "Today, in East Africa, I received my final copy of The Navigator." The Navigator, for those of you who don't know, was the official newsletter of this association, which I was a proud member, having served in Desert Storm and Desert Shield. It is with heavy heart that I read through the pages which told a story of your last 30 years as an organization. I salute each and every one of you from the greatest generation. I too stand as a proud member, and I will not forget the sacrifices made by you and your comrades. I will, to the best of my ability, uphold your proud traditions and those of the United States Navy as long as I am able. I will pass these stories and memories to the new sailors in my charge and to my descendants as well. Fear not, boys, for I will stand the watch. The chief has the con. May God continue to bless each and every one of you, and thank you all for allowing me the privilege of sailing with you these many years. Fair winds and following seas. Ladies and gentlemen, today's ceremony will conclude with the retiring of the colors by the DCR Park Rangers as the bugler sounds retreat, after which all are welcome to join us for light refreshments at the tent directly behind you. And please enjoy the static display as well under the additional tent, where you can see a model replica of an actual LST built here in the yard with many of the other citations. There's a copy of the Navigator as well. I thank each and every one of you for coming here today to honor this great man of the greatest generation. Detail, hook, hook. Color guard, retire, colors. Please rise. Raise